Hey friends, so ever since I discovered that the morning light looks nice through the windows, I've been making all of my videos exclusively in the morning, but it's midnight now and I just felt like making another video before going to bed, so I'm just going to do that. And I'm using the light directly above my head as lighting. I think it looks alright. So today's ad lib, I want to talk about stories and storytelling, and I do enjoy how, as I've done a few of these, I've now done I think like maybe 10 ad libs or 7 or 8 ad libs, and I like how I'm starting to fall into this nice routine slash pattern of picking a noun or a phrase and then just riffing off of that for half an hour effectively. Feels good, and I like where this is going. I like what I'm doing with it, and I'm just going to keep going. So for today, I want to talk about stories. I am a marketing guy by profession, and which, I don't have a ton of pride about that. I mean, it's complex. There's layers to it, but let me just I guess kind of walk through my childhood ambitions, right? So when I was a child, some of the things I wanted to, at some point, I kind of, people would say things like, oh, you're good with words, you should be a lawyer, because, lawyers make money, pretty good money for arguing. And I bought into that a little bit, but it never really excited me. It never really, I think there's something about the structure of a courtroom that to me feels almost overly constricted. It's like the frame that you're operating in is fixed, and I like to play with frames. I like to change the frame. That's what I like to do. And other things I've been interested in, I wanted to be a journalist at some point. There was a period of time where I wanted to be a rock star musician, right? A songwriter, a singer-songwriter, writing original music and sharing it with the world and touring. So there's the storytelling aspect of that. At some point, I wanted to be a writer, like a novelist or a poet, and there's a storytelling aspect to that. At some point, I wanted to work in magazines. I remember when I was a teenager and I used to go to the library to procrastinate/study. I would end up reading a whole bunch of magazines. And I liked something about the structure and frame of a magazine that was like a reading experience. I liked the idea of constructing experiences for people to inhabit. And even when I made my first homepage on the web, right, you can kind of say that I was trying to create an experience for people that they could inhabit. Like, you come to my website, you see a list of my favorite jokes, you see a list of my favorite links, you see a list of my favorite games, and it's kind of, welcome to my space, and here are the things you can do. I've always liked that, and I find myself thinking now about a quote from Jeanette Winterson, and she wrote, I believe, she said something like, so I can't remember the specifics, and I'm not going to look it up right now, but she said something like, I'll post it in the comments later, but she said something like, I had to write my story to find a way out of the narrow story that I was kind of imprisoned in. There's a narrative that you inherit. If you don't come up with your own narratives, if you don't do narrative work of your own, then you are gonna inherit some narrative from your family, from your friends, from your culture, from your country, your city, whatever. There are stories that you're born into, right? When you're born in the middle of a story. Even in human civilization, to be born in the year 1990 or whatever it is, right? Like, it's like dreams. You always start dreaming in the middle of the dream. You never quite know when exactly the dream started. You're just in the middle of it. And it's the same for life, right? You're born in the middle of the story. You die before the story ends. And so we're kind of, I bet there's a nice Latin phrase for, in media res? I don't know. But just this idea of, okay, you're born, you inherit a bunch of stories about, this is what your name is, this is what you're a citizen of, you're from this religion or that religion, and this is what your life is going to be, these are your options, you're going to get married, have kids, raise a family, get promoted, there are all these sets of stories that you can inherit inherit, right? And for a lot of people in the world, I think that's fine. Like, you just kind of, you don't really have any problems with the stories that you inherit. And I think a lot of the most interesting and a lot of the best stories in the world, like in terms of, whether we're talking about plays or theater or music, art, whatever, they tend to come, I think, from people who are maladjusted, meaning the stories that they inherited were not serving them. And so they had to come up with their own stories that were more compelling to them, more honest, more true in some way. This is kind of my pet theory for, people say things like, why are queer people, LGBTQ people, why do they seem to be disproportionately represented in theater and the arts and drama? And there's somebody else who said, I don't know if it's Winterson again or someone else who said that, I think it might be Winterson again, who said that, people think that poetry is soft, but, the people who are drawn to poetry in her experience, their experience, is that, you need a tough language, or you need to confront pain and difficulty and heartbreak and whatever it is that the poetry is calling out to you with. And, so the idea that poetry is soft and frivolous is inaccurate, is incorrect. Or maybe it's a selective bias. Like, you see the frivolous stuff and you kind of assume it. And similarly, there's this point that Karl Paulnack makes. He was like the head of the Boston Conservatory, and he was giving an address to freshmen. I'll definitely link this in the comments below, where he talks about. And this really inspired me when I was a teenager, and I was obsessed with music, and there was not much music at school, and the adults in my life didn't seem to appreciate music, but Karl Paulnack did. And he talked about how anytime there's like great tragedy in the world, people heal. The first act of healing tends to be singing. Like after 9/11 happened, and there's like tragedy and grief, and people don't know how to make sense of that. Like when people come together, they start singing songs as a way of healing. And he has multiple descriptions of things like that. Like even in the concentration camps in Nazi Germany, there were prisoners who were writing music in abject despair. They were writing music. Music was their way of saying, my life has meaning, and this is how I choose to. Even as you tell me that I'm worthless, this is how I express my worth. And this narrative work, I believe, is central to humanity. Like, and in Dead Poets Society, which is a movie that I think didn't age super well, but the teacher, Robin Williams' character, he says science, law, chemistry, all those things are they're great at helping us achieve things. They're great at helping us, extend our lives, right? Medicine, right? Economics, they help us accumulate resources which we need to survive. But the reason we survive, the reason we persist is story, is meaning, is a sense that tomorrow is worth waking up for. And it's not just about pleasure, it's not just about money or those things. And they don't discuss this in school much. And again, I don't blame school, because it's difficult to talk about difficult things to a super broad audience, and it's a very personal thing, which is why I'm making videos, because it's a very personal thing. But yeah, you need a story or a set of stories to orient your life around, and it doesn't have to be a fixed story. You can change your idea of what your story is over time, and in fact, I think it's almost inevitable that you have to rewrite your narrative over and over again. And when I say it's inevitable if you're someone like me, or you're someone adjacent to me. I mean, maybe there are people for whom it's not necessary, but that's not who I'm making videos for. All right. Story. What is story? Story is an idea. Story is a sense of purpose. It's a sense of, what does this mean? It's you're asking the question of, what does this mean? And I think that the kind of very general story, and you can look at Disney movies and all of those things. I was observing a while ago that there are so many movies: Black Panther, Wonder Woman, I think Tangled, like the Rapunzel remake, Star Wars maybe, I'm not sure, but like there's so many of those movies where the central idea is that the protagonist had a parent, so King T'Chaka, Wonder Woman's mom, like whatever. They had parents who were trying to protect them, and in their attempt to protect them, they were like cocooning them in ignorance, and their ignorance harmed them, right? So it's this story of you have been lied to in a certain way, or your parents or the world you inherited was not completely honest with you, right? Whether to protect you or otherwise, and you have to learn to redefine your relationship with the truth, redefine your relationship with the story you've been told, redefine your relationship with authority, right? And that's amazing. Like, I think that's so important. Like your parent, most people's parents, I think, are unlikely to talk to them directly about this, and teachers won't tell you this. The authorities will very seldom explicitly invite you to question authority, right? Like it's inconvenient, it's tedious, it's messy, it's expensive, whatever. And like, just story is a way of telling truths that may not be feasible to convey in a sort of straightforward way. Like, you may need metaphors and allegories to as Trojan horses to share insight, right? When I was a child, I used to like to read a lot of books, and there was a lot of non-fiction as well, like books about ancient civilizations and stars and even when you're talking about science and non-fiction, right? Simply discovering that there are planets other than the Earth, and that the Earth goes around the sun. That we take it for granted these days, but there was a time where that simple observation of material reality violated the existing story that people were living in. People were living in a geocentric reality where Earth, so like God created man on the Earth, and the Earth exists for man, right? And there's all these, and so much of science, the scientific progress has been this continual kind of you could say humiliation, or just kind of what's a nicer way of saying humiliation? Like just humbling experience for man. Like, at first you think you're at the center of the universe, you're not. You think that life was made for you, it wasn't. You think that okay, if the Earth isn't the center of the universe, maybe the solar system is. It's not. Like, repeatedly over and over again, we find that we are not nearly as central to the story of the universe as we had hoped. And yet, one of my favorite bits from Neil Tyson is he talks about how somebody asks what's the most profound thing or the most beautiful fact, the most astounding fact. And he said that, people look up at the night sky and they feel small and insignificant, but the atoms that constitute our bodies come from the Earth, which come from, like the heavy atoms, the heavy chemicals that are on Earth. They come from older stars. So stars, start out as helium and whatnot, and then they compress and they get, I don't know the specific physics, but like stars kind of incubate. I think he used the word crucibles, right? The crucibles that cooked minerals into heavier and heavier elements, and then they explode and scatter their enriched guts across the galaxies, and then that forms the Earth, and then that. So we are made of star stuff. It's true. It's like verifiable fact that the atoms that make up your body, my body, your body, the computers that we're watching this on, they came from stars elsewhere in the galaxy or in other galaxies. I'm not precisely sure about the other galaxies part, but the point is we are connected. We are part of the goings on of the universe, right? And that's a beautiful story, because we are no longer kind of separate from. We are not like this little, those like snow globes with like that's very isolated and kind of like everything inside the globe is happening and everything outside the globe is a different reality. That's not the case. Like, we are more like all of existence is a wave, right? All of existence is an ocean, and we are each waves on the ocean, which and the waves will break and crash, and the atoms of the water will split. Like recently, Chidi from The Good Place used this idea, which is not a new idea, but it's this sense of how everything is connected. When you really accept and consider this, it can when you really step into the story and you let it kind of permeate through you, and you realize that, like, these are my hands and my fingers, and yeah, they seem to end here, right? But while the entity that is me is inside this body, that's just kind of my point of view, and really, it's kind of an illusion, and I'm part of everything, right? Like, the Big Bang didn't stop; it started happening, and it's still going on. So it's like we are all kind of leaves on twigs, on branches, on the same great trunk. We all started out from that same singular point. That's a beautiful story. We are all connected. We are all part of the same thing. And there's many ways to make sense of that. But I found that, and this is also true for language. We all speak language. We all speak English or Mandarin or Spanish, whatever language you speak. You speak some language. You didn't come up with it. Languages are massive multiplayer games, right? That people have been playing for millennia. Every utterance, every word has a history, right? And these words have been passed from mouth to ear, from mind to mind, for generations, forever. It's been going on since the first, monkey made like throat sounds, whatever. Like, and language is evolving all the time, and it evolves because we evolve it, because we say things, and the way we say things passes on. I have noticed that, I have certain turns of phrase that I very clearly inherited from my ex-boss. So my ex-boss, Dinesh, he would say phrases like, and again, he says that. There are a few other words. He uses the word precise a lot. And he says, he has a few turns of phrases and inflections and stuff that just by sitting next to him for 5 years, I inherited his language a little bit. And, it's happening all the time. We are all kind of borrowing and sharing language. We're all picking up each other's words, ideas spread, memes spread. We are all the same. We're all part of the big, grand social graph, right? And we're all connected, and it's beautiful to realize that, because then it's really true that you are not an isolated being, and your death eventually will not be, it's truly true that you will, while your physical body may be gone, like, each person is really a sort of dance, and a pattern in space-time, and your pattern persists during your lifetime, and it diffuses out even. And like, even though this, are you familiar with, like, there are all these folk songs and folk stories and like songs that people sing at, like sporting chants, and like nobody really knows who exactly came up with it, but it just persists on and on. The song goes on long after. Before we were born, it was going on, and after we're gone, it's going on. We didn't start the fire, right? And I think there's a beauty in that. I think there is a sense of continuity. There's a sense of something great, bigger than me is happening. I get to participate in it. I get to share it with other people. And, I'm not alone in it. And I'm not, I get to play roles that can be important, but I'm not obliged to be important in a way. Like, some people get kind of stressed out about, like, oh, how can I be relevant to the world? How can I be useful to the world? Am I like a freeloader or a useless burden? And you're not, like, nobody asked to be born, right? Like, so you were born without your consent, which is, think about it, nobody asked. So it's a gift that was given to you, a gift and a curse, a blessing and a curse, right? And the thing is, while you can't escape, existential despair, you can't escape the inevitability of your bodily functions and your hunger and your need to just having to participate in reality is such a, you didn't ask for this, you didn't sign up for this. But while you have that, you also have the opportunity to play hooky in a way. You get to decide for yourself. You get to define what is important and valuable and interesting to you. Like, you get to do that. You really get to do that. Like, nobody really tells you this, in my experience. Like, nobody really told me that I am the monarch of my life, right? I am the first of my name, so and so, blah blah blah. And I get to if I decide. So, like, a few days ago, my wife and I were walking to have dinner, and we saw a snail crossing the pavement. And we just decided that, hey, we're gonna stand here and make sure that the snail makes it across the pavement safe. And, like, why would anybody do that? Is a snail important? It could be dead by now for all I know. And we spent 10 minutes doing that. And who cares about a snail? Effective altruism and all that stuff. Like, surely there's better things we could be doing at our time. Blah blah blah. But we decided that in our one and precious life, that we were gonna spend 10 minutes together as husband and wife to chaperone a snail across the pavement. And I like that little story that we created for ourselves between the two of us, and I shared it on Twitter, and so there's like a couple of dozen people who saw it as well, and now I'm telling it to you, so you get to hear it as well. And that, that's a little story that spreads. And again, I'm not saying that everybody should go out and look for a snail to shepherd, but just this idea that you can frame your story, you can decide what's interesting, what's important, and you don't have to feel guilt or shame about things. This can get into kind of every decent piece of advice can be weaponized to get back onto your own bullshit. So everybody can find some piece of advice to justify being a dick to other people. So please don't do that. Please don't take anything I say and then be like, oh, Visa said I can decide what's important, and so I decided that my obligations and my friends and other people are not important, and so I'm going to be an asshole to them. Please don't do that. Okay, I am trusting you with I'm choosing to have faith that you guys are going to get a sense of the vibe that I'm putting across, and that I would be very displeased if you did that. The point is that you can, I saw somebody say something like, people tend to ask, what does the world need of me? And the answer is, you should do what makes you come alive, because what the world needs is people who have come alive, and like, there are so many people these days who seem to be, trying to be the next Steve Jobs, and they approach it by saying, oh, I want to start a tech company. But Steve Jobs didn't become Steve Jobs by waking up as a young person and saying, I want to start a tech company. He was a guy who did acid, he went to calligraphy class, or typography class or whatever. And I feel like the most important story about Steve Jobs is probably that him and Wozniak were pranksters, right? They were pranking people for fun. Sometimes they did some shit that was borderline, kind of, not very ethical and stuff like that. And like the big prank that they did was actually illegal, which was to come up with blue boxes. And you can look this up. A blue box is a device that you can build. I mean, it's no longer relevant, but at the time, when telephone systems were like, enveloping the world, a blue box was a way you could you could like spoof that you were someone else on a telephone system, and you could make like free phone calls basically across the entire global telecommunications network. And so Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak, they were saying that, as young men with no capital, no money or whatever, they were able to build something with like their little hobbyist hardware, and they made something that let them leverage billions of dollars of infrastructure. And that, that changed their idea of what level of influence they could have in the world. It was a new story for them, right? And again, this is the power of story. Do you understand? It's your sense, it's your beliefs, your limiting beliefs about what you can or cannot do. It's about the assumptions that you have about how you're supposed to live your life. And everything is potentially negotiable, is potentially changeable. You don't have to live your life the way you've been living it. You don't have to prioritize the things that you have been prioritizing. You don't have to listen to what other people tell you should be doing, which isn't to say that you should discard everybody's advice and do something irresponsible. But the point is, you can question everything. You can wake up tomorrow and decide to go to another country. You can do so many things. And where I am with that right now is I've experimented with many different stories in my life about my life. I think for me a big part of it was when I was younger, I think I was very much all about expressing myself, playing in a rock band, being cool, being kind of subversive and like happy-go-lucky and kind of rebellious. And then I got married, and so there's a long story there, but I'm not really going to get into it right now. But after I got married, I changed my story to it's time for me to become responsible. It's time for me to focus on my work and to make money to pay the bills. It's time for me to I've let down a lot of people in my life. I burned some relationships with my own incompetence and lack of emotional intelligence and sensitivity. And so I was determined to become a kinder person, a more empathetic person, a person who kept his word, a person who kept secrets. And, I lived that life for, I think, about 5-6 years. I was very depressed during that time. I remember feeling like I had been full of shit basically earlier on. And now that I look back from after that, I realized that my middle story, so like let's say the early story is this idealistic naive kid who wants to just play and have fun, and then some bad shit happens, and then now there's this kind of Empire Strikes Back phase, right, where I'm just feeling really shitty about all the damage and hurt I've caused in the world, and feeling like I don't know what the fuck I'm talking about, feeling like I'm a disappointment and a failure in some ways, feeling like I wasted my potential and I will never amount to anything, and it's time for me to repent. Right? I felt that I had to make up for lost time. I felt that I had to just become better, and I did, right? And that went on for a few years. It was like a belly of the whale phase for me. It was about confronting my failures, my failings. It was very painful, and I felt very lonely and isolated. Even though I was married to the love of my life, and I had good friends in my life, I just like internally, psychologically, I just felt like so much of my early days was wrong. And then I went through that, and I feel like I crossed many good thresholds and succeeded at several levels at those things. And then I came out on the other end, and I have been learning that actually a lot of the things that I was about when I was in my early game, my early stage as a teenager, I was right. I was right that I had good ideas that I had to share with the world. I was right that, I had to be kind of playful and rebellious in some ways, and cheeky and mischievous, right? I was right about society being kind of oppressive in unintelligent and clueless ways. I was right about a lot of things, but I didn't have the skills to go about to act on it skillfully. I acted on it in a very naive, silly, childlike way because I was a child, right? Childish way. I'm trying to be childlike again. So I think I went through like a middle phase of trying to adult and trying to be a man and trying to, make sure my affairs are in order, fuck my feelings, like just do what is right. And now I'm like, okay, I'm ready to grow my hair out. I'm ready. I've earned my piece. I've saved up a bunch of money, and now I'm like, okay, let's make YouTube videos, right? Let's talk to people. Let's have fun, but in a responsible way. Let's be sensitive to other people's feelings. Let's hear other people's stories before I impose mine on them, right? And I've been in this phase now where okay, so initially I had this story that I love very much, and I would impose it on other people, and then I realized that the story is kind of fucked up, and I'm gonna kind of crumple it up and throw it in the waste paper basket and just go through this despair of not having a story that I believed in, and then I kind of clawed my way up through that, and then now I'm like, okay, I have my story, I have multiple stories, But what I really want is to hear from other people about their stories. And I want to understand where people are coming from. I want to understand where people are. I recognize that I've been privileged in a lot of ways, and I want to use my skill set and my privilege to help other people, come up with stories together, right? Like share stories. Tell me where you came from. Tell me how you became who you are. Tell me. There's this beautiful line from Jon Kabat-Zinn where he says, sometimes in a fight, or like in a argument in family or whatever, somebody says, "Who do you think you are?" And John says, "What a love! Like if you can remove the venom, right, and you ask it from a place of intimacy and vulnerability. Who do you think you are?" It's a beautiful question. It's such a inviting, loving thing you can ask if you ask it from a place of. Well, I mean, if you go up to your partner right now and you ask them that in the sweetest voice you can, they'll probably think like, "Are you okay? Are you on drugs? Are you drunk?" But it is a beautiful question to consider. Who do you think you are? Who are you? Who are you? Where are you from? What's your name? What do you care about? What matters to you? What's your life about? What makes you hurt? What injustices have you endured? What are you aching for? What are you yearning for? What are you about? Where are you going? Where have you been? Where do you want to go? What do you want to see? What do you want to do? What would you do if you could do anything?